After my husband's funeral, my daughter drove me to the river and shouted, "Get out of here, old witch! The house and the business are mine now." I stood on the clay, clutching my bag, as she drove away without looking back. No phone. No money. But she had no idea that I had prepared everything long before, while her father was still alive. Subscribe to the channel and share your stories in the comments. And now let's get started. The last car pulled away from the cemetery, gravel crunching under the tires, the taillights smearing into the dusk. I was still holding my black scarf, the one Frank wore when the chemo chilled him, when Madison's voice cut through the stillness. "Come on, Mom. I'll drive you home." Home. The word tasted like iron in my mouth, but I followed her anyway, clutching my suitcase like a child with its last toy. We didn't speak on the drive. My daughter's face was a mask, too smooth, too painted, too practiced. Her eyes flicked toward the river as if something there mattered more than me. Then she veered off, not toward Main Street, not toward the house, but down a slick dirt road leading to the clay banks outside Riverside. The car jolted to a stop. Mud splattered my shoes as she shoved the suitcase onto the ground. The handles snapped with the force. "Get out, old witch!" She snarled, voice sharp with a hatred I hadn't heard since she was 16 and screaming about curfews. "The house and the business are mine now." Her nails flashed in the fading light as she slammed the door, engine roaring. And just like that, my only daughter sped away, gravel spitting, without a glance in the mirror. I stood on wet clay, Frank's scarf twisted in my hands, my heart still thudding from the burial that morning. My husband lowered into the ground at 10 a.m. By 6, his daughter, our daughter, was lowering me into humiliation. Somewhere across the river I heard Tyler honk, impatient, urging her to hurry. My son-in-law, always in a rush for the next scheme. The river gurgled against the bank as if it, too, was laughing. My palms were raw from catching myself in the dirt. No phone. No wallet. Nothing but the scarf and its weight against my chest. But Madison didn't know what Frank and I built. She didn't know the one thing that mattered. I brushed grit from my hands, unclasped the brooch pinned to the scarf's corner, and slid open the hidden compartment we had designed together on a winter night. My fingers touched metal. Cold, flat, unyielding. A key. The key Madison never knew existed. The last car pulled away from the cemetery, gravel crunching like bones under its tires. The air smelled of wet grass and lilies beginning to rot in their vases. I was still holding the black scarf, Frank's scarf, the one he wrapped around his shoulders when chemo froze him from the inside, when Madison's voice sliced through the silence. "Come on, Mom. I'll drive you home." Home. The word snagged in my throat like a thorn. Home was no longer what it had been 2 days ago. Home was now missing Frank's steady voice, his shuffling slippers on the hardwood, his nightly ritual of polishing the register drawer after closing the diner. But I followed her anyway, suitcase bumping against my calf, the handle taped from years of travel to Frank's hospital and back. The air inside Madison's car was sharp with some expensive perfume. Chemical sweetness that didn't belong to her, not really. It coated the leather seats, already erasing the smell of earth from the cemetery. She wore her grief like a designer dress. Fitted, elegant, and removable once the audience was gone. We drove in silence. My daughter's face was a smooth mask, too smooth, too powdered, as if any real expression would crack it. She kept her eyes on the road, but her knuckles whitened on the wheel. The only sign of life was the occasional glance toward the river, her pupils flashing in the dimming light as though the water held something for her. I waited for her to say something, anything about her father, about the service, about the way my hands shook when I placed a rose on his coffin. But the silence thickened until even the sound of my breath irritated her. Then, without warning, she veered left, not toward Main Street, not toward the house Frank and I had built with 30 years of sweat, but down a narrow dirt path leading to the clay banks outside Riverside. The tires spun in mud before catching. The car jolted to a stop so abruptly my suitcase toppled from the seat. She flung her door open and stepped out with the determination of someone executing a plan rehearsed in her head 100 times. "Madison." My voice sounded old even to me. "Why?" She yanked my suitcase out, the zipper tearing against the gravel, the handle snapping loose with a crack that echoed in the twilight. "Get out, old witch," she hissed, her voice raw with a hatred I hadn't heard since she was 16, shouting curfew threats at me. accusing me of *ling her freedom. Only this time there was no adolescent rebellion in her tone. It was cold, deliberate. The house and the business are mine now. Her lips curled around the words, venom made flesh. I sat frozen, fingers clawed into Frank's scarf, while she slammed the door, the echo ricocheting off the trees. The engine roared like an animal breaking free. Gravel spat under the tires, stinging my legs, as she sped away without even glancing into the rearview mirror. And then silence. I stood on wet clay, the river glistening like oil, Frank's scarf twisted between my hands. The ground was soft enough to swallow me whole if I let it. My heart still thudded from the burial that morning. 10 a.m. My husband lowered into the ground. 6 p.m. His daughter, our daughter, lowered me into humiliation. Somewhere across the river, I heard the impatient blast of a horn. Tyler. Always rushing, always pushing Madison forward, like a vulture nudging her toward fresh carrion. The river lapped against the bank as if it were laughing. A low, steady chuckle, mocking the woman left behind. I bent to pick up the suitcase, but it was useless. The handle was gone, the zipper shredded. Mud streaked the fabric like wounds. I had no phone. No wallet. Just the scarf and the weight of 34 years of marriage pressing on my chest like a stone. My palms stung with grit where I'd caught myself from falling. I wiped them on my skirt and felt suddenly foolish, suddenly ancient. I was 62, and my own daughter had discarded me like garbage. But Madison didn't know everything. She didn't know about the nights Frank and I whispered in the dark, planning for the day when love twisted into greed. She didn't know how deeply he feared her ambition, her hunger for shortcuts, her marriage to a man who always wanted more than he earned. She didn't know about Plan B. I unclasped the brooch pinned to the scarf, the one Frank had given me on our 25th anniversary. It looked ordinary, pearl center, scratched silver rim, but inside, hidden beneath the clasp, was the secret we had built together. The compartment clicked open beneath my thumb. Cold metal pressed into my skin. A key. Flat, unyielding, silent. The key Madison never knew existed. For a moment I just stood there, gripping it so tightly it left an imprint in my palm. Memories tumbled through me. Frank's voice, husky with illness, whispering, "Nora, we can't control her nature, but we can protect you. Protect what we built." And then I realized what she thought was the end was only the beginning. I tied the scarf tighter around my shoulders, let the river's damp breath cool my face, and straightened my spine. The mud squelched beneath my shoes as I took my first step away from the bank, away from the woman who had once been my daughter, and toward the truth she would never own. Because while Madison thought she had shoved me into ruin, Frank and I had already built the escape hatch, the one that began with this key. The morning after the riverbank, I woke with a stiffness in my bones that no bed could cure. The clay was still on my shoes, a reminder of the place where Madison had exiled me. I walked until I reached the bus stop, scarf tied tightly, suitcase dragging without a handle. There I asked a young man for a phone. He looked me over, pity flickering across his face before he muttered, "They were looking for you. Don't come back." His eyes slid away as though my presence was contagious. I wanted to ask who they were, but I already knew. My daughter. My son-in-law. The heirs apparent of what Frank and I had built brick by brick. At my own gate, the locks were changed. A paper taped to the door in bold black letters read, "Property of Madison Collins." Not Nora Collins. Not Frank Collins. Madison. The words sliced deeper than the shovel lowering Frank's coffin. I stood there long enough for neighbors to peek through blinds. Curtains shifted like whispers. A woman walking her dog slowed her pace, then quickened it when she caught my eye. The house, my house, looked foreign with its smug sign. I walked to the pharmacy, thinking perhaps I could buy a prepaid phone, something to reach Harry Light, Frank's lawyer. My knees ached as I stood in line, clutching my bank card like a relic. When the cashier slid it and frowned, I knew. "Ma'am, this card is declined," she said, voice louder than needed. Heads turned. A man behind me smirked, a teenager snickered. Heat climbed my face. "Run it again," I whispered. She did. Declined. The giggles behind me multiplied, little knives digging into my back. I left the counter empty-handed, clutching Frank's scarf as though fabric could shield me from humiliation. By evening, the gossip had already spread through Riverside like wildfire. Pastor Jim called me, voice oily with concern. Nora, perhaps you and Madison should sit down. Reconcile. Families must stick together in grief. But I had already seen the truth. Madison's first post bloomed across Facebook like a flag planted on my grave. Dad's gone, time for a fresh life, no toxic people. Comments poured in. So proud of you, girl. You deserve freedom. Cut ties with negativity. Each like was another nail sealing me outside the life I had built. At the church parking lot, Betty, my neighbor of 20 years, approached with a whisper sharp enough to cut. Heard Nora lost everything in debts. She patted my arm as though consoling me, though her eyes glittered with satisfaction. I said nothing. Silence became my last dignity. By nightfall I was in a highway motel, the kind with buzzing neon and carpets that smelled of mildew. The clerk asked for ID. I had none. I pressed Frank's scarf against my chest, digging into the brooch until my finger felt the edge of the hidden compartment. Later, alone in the room with its yellow light and humming fridge, I finally opened the lining of the scarf. Inside lay a slim blue-striped envelope sealed with Frank's neat hand. Open upon my death. I slid it with trembling fingers. A key clinked onto the bedspread. Alongside it, a folded note in Frank's handwriting. Box 214. Safe deposit. Mid-County Bank. Trust what we built, not what they say. F. The breath left me. While my daughter paraded her victory, while the town laughed at my decline, Frank had left me a map. But before sleep came, memory pressed in. 3 decades of sacrifice. Frank and I building Frank's place, from nothing but sweat and borrowed hope. I remembered standing in a freezing kitchen at 3 a.m., chopping onions until my hands blistered, so the diner could open at dawn. I remembered patching Madison's school uniforms with the same fingers that counted payroll for line cooks. Every new booth, every repaint, every coffee truck mile. My blood was in it. Madison never saw the labor. She only saw the cash register ringing. As a teenager, she mocked the smell of grease in my hair. I'll never flip burgers like you, Mom, she sneered, tossing her books on the counter. I smiled then, thinking it was ambition. Now I saw it for what it was. Contempt disguised as aspiration. I paid for her college, state tuition, dorm fees, endless textbooks, while wearing shoes with cardboard slipped under the sole. I skipped vacations, skipped doctor visits, skipped anything that wasn't for them. Tyler entered her life in his shiny car. Leather seats bought on credit. Image matters, he said, leaning on Frank's counter, sipping free coffee he never tipped for. I watched my daughter glow under his empty promises. And now together they had erased me. In that motel, the walls thin as paper, I could hear the man in the next room arguing with his wife over quarters for the vending machine. Their fight felt more an asterisk mate, more human, than anything Madison had offered me in years. I held Frank's envelope to my chest, hearing his voice steady in my ear. We're not victims, Nora. We're owners. Remember that. The motel clock ticked loud. Midnight crept in. I was 62 years old, penniless, humiliated, cut out of my own home, my own business, my own bloodline. And yet I had a key. Madison thought she'd ended me. She hadn't realized Frank and I had laid the foundation for something she could not touch. Foresight. The public had laughed at my decline, but they hadn't yet seen me rise. Morning broke gray over Riverside, the kind of sky that pressed down like a lid. I left the motel before the clerk asked for another night's payment. My shoes carried motel dust and clay from the riverbank, blending shame with resolve. The bus rattled down Main Street toward Mid-County Bank. I sat clutching Frank's scarf, my fingers curled around the small flat key as though it were the only artery still keeping me alive. The bank's marble lobby smelled of disinfectant and fresh paper, too clean, too sterile for the storm inside me. I approached the counter, voice thin but steady. Safe deposit box. 214. The teller glanced at me with that professional politeness banks breed, then checked her screen. Yes, Mrs. Collins. Please follow me. Her words hit harder than she knew. Mrs. Collins. Not declined card. Not property of Madison. Mrs. Collins. Still me. We entered the steel vault. Rows of identical boxes lined the walls, quiet as tombstones. She handed me a small cubicle and left me alone. The key slid into box 214 with a smooth click. I pulled. Out came a green folder. edges worn as if Frank had handled it often, and beneath it, a small flash drive glinting like a secret. My knees trembled as I set them on the table. The folder's label read in Frank's bold block letters, Nora/Legacy. Inside were layers of documents, each one a shield forged in foresight. First, a notarized power of attorney naming me sole decision-maker for all trust matters. Then, a copy of a $260,000 Keyman life insurance policy. Frank's handwriting circling the beneficiary, River Trust. Beneath that, copies of purchase contracts for the diner, the coffee truck, and the land lot where they sat. Every paper was a stone in the wall Frank had built against Madison's hunger. At the bottom, a letter with the seal of attorney Harry Light. If Madison attempts to seize business or property, activate the River Trust package immediately. See enclosed envelopes. 3 sealed envelopes lay beneath, labeled in neat black ink. Bank. County Recorder. Judge. Each bore Frank's initials across the flap. Proof against tampering. My hand shook as I lifted the flash drive. The paper inside explained. Audio files. Conversations with accountant. Tyler's debts. Madison's plan. I plugged it into the small vault computer. Frank's voice spilled into the room. Rough with the gravel of illness but steady with purpose. Tyler's drawn $32,000 against the diner account. Personal charges disguised as marketing. If we let him continue, Madison will follow. We need safeguards. I want Nora protected. Another recording, Madison's voice, too sharp, too eager. Once Dad's gone, we'll squeeze Mom out and sign it all fast. She's soft. Easy. Just push. The words sliced through me like glass. My own daughter, speaking of me as if I were an obstacle, not a mother. I pressed the pause key and closed my eyes. Images flooded back. Me standing in a cold diner kitchen at 4 a.m., rolling out biscuit dough while Madison slept warm in her bed. Frank and I handing her tuition checks we could barely cover, telling her study hard, this is your future. Madison tossing books on the couch, sighing, I hate this town. You and Dad are stuck here forever. All those years we were the foundation. She never looked down to see the hands holding her up. I flipped to the last sheet. A checklist written in Frank's familiar hand. Blocky letters pressed deep into the paper. 1. Call Harry Light. 2. Notify Blake Harris, Mid-County Bank. 3. Insurer Martha O'Neill. 4. County Recorder filing. 5. Sheriff's Deputy Rose. 6. Community message, facts not heat. At the bottom, Nora, we're not victims. We're owners. Follow the checklist. I trust you. F. Tears blurred the ink, but I refused to let them fall onto the paper. Frank had not spent his final months drawing this plan for me to ruin it with weakness. I pressed the flash drive into my palm until it hurt. The steel vault seemed to hum around me, alive with Frank's voice, his foresight, his stubborn belief in me even when I doubted myself. For years I had been the quiet partner, the one who balanced ledgers, who patched uniforms, who smiled at vendors while Frank charmed them. Madison called me invisible. Tyler called me old-fashioned. But here in this vault, Frank's trust weighed heavier than all their mockery. I packed the folder carefully back into its envelope, tucked the flash drive deep into my purse and straightened my back. When I left the bank, the sunlight had shifted, warm on my face. For the first time since Frank's burial, I wasn't cold. The town still gossiped. Madison's posts still gathered likes. Tyler still honked from his shiny car. But I carried in my bag something stronger than their noise. Proof. Keys. Authority. As I walked past the diner, the smell of frying bacon drifted out, sharp and familiar. Workers bustled in the back, unaware of the storm overhead. Madison's latest post had declared, "Diner closed. Mom wrecked everything." Yet through the window I saw a line cook scraping the grill, a waitress stacking cups, order slips fluttering. The truth waited, and I had the tools to deliver it. I remembered Frank's last night at home. His body frail, his eyes bright. He pressed the scarf into my hands. "When it comes, Nora, don't cry. Don't beg. Don't fight on their level. Just follow the plan." At the time I thought he meant funeral arrangements. Now I understood. The River Trust wasn't just paperwork. It was Frank's final gift, armor. And so, on that bright morning after so much darkness, I began to move. Harry Light arrived 20 minutes after I called him. I had dialed with hands shaking, afraid he wouldn't remember me, afraid Frank's faith in him was misplaced. But when his battered Buick pulled up in front of the bakery where I'd taken refuge, his first words were not pity. "Frank told me you'd call. Let's begin." Those words were oxygen. We sat at a small round table, the smell of cinnamon rolls wrapping around us while I unpacked the green folder. He examined each page like a surgeon preparing for delicate work. Steady, methodical, no wasted motion. "This," Harry said, tapping the trust papers, "is your anchor. Frank set up the River Trust last year. You are the sole trustee, not co-trustee. Sole. The diner, the coffee truck, all accounts tied to them, legally belong to the trust, not to Madison. As trustee, you have the power to manage, restrict, or revoke access." His finger moved to the next document. The land trust. Upon Frank's death, the property passes into escrow pending verification of trustee rights. That means Madison's rushed transfer of the house is voidable. I leaned back, the words sinking in like slow rain after drought. "So she has nothing?" "She has noise," Harry replied. "She has Facebook posts and gossip. But legally, she has nothing that can't be undone." He flipped to the insurance policy. "Here. A Keyman policy worth $260,000. Beneficiary. The River Trust. That payout will stabilize everything, payroll, vendors, debts. You're not just surviving, Nora. You'll be running this place stronger than before." His confidence wrapped around me like armor. For months I had lived in dread, watching Frank's body betray him, watching bills stack higher, watching Madison hover like a crow. Now, for the first time, I saw a horizon not controlled by grief or fear. Harry laid out the battle plan in precise steps. Today we file at the bank and with the insurance company. Tomorrow we record the trust with the county and issue notice to the vendor network. The day after, we'll file a temporary injunction preventing Madison and Tyler from touching a single asset. In parallel, we prepare community communications. Facts, not drama. Frank would want the diner's reputation protected. The word diner cracked open a wave of memory. I saw Frank behind the counter 20 years ago, wiping mugs with a rag, greeting truckers by name. Madison, then 12, sulking in the corner booth with her homework, rolling her eyes at the smell of bacon. "Why can't you own something nice, Mom? Like a clothing store?" She'd sneered. She never understood that what we built was not grease, it was dignity. Harry slid a pen across the table. "First, signatures to reaffirm your authority." I signed each page with deliberate care, my hand steadier with each stroke. Every signature was a line in the sand. When we finished, Harry looked at me squarely. "This will not be easy. Madison will scream. Tyler will threaten. They'll call you heartless, manipulative, ungrateful. Do not respond. Let the law move. The law is not loud, it is steady." His words echoed Frank's own. "Nora, we're not victims. We're owners." By late afternoon, we walked into Mid-County Bank together. Blake Harris, the branch manager, met us in his glass office. He had known Frank for decades, his expression softening when he saw the folder. Harry spoke first. "Trust activation. Change of authority. Account freezes." Blake nodded, already pulling forms. The paperwork flew across the desk. Signature after signature. Madison's auto drafts canceled. Tyler's credit card suspended. The operating account shifted under my sole control. The trust received its own EIN, its own identity, separate from their claws. I half expected alarms to blare, for Madison to storm through the glass doors screaming. But the bank remained hushed, only the faint clicking of keys and printers filling the space. When it was done, Blake leaned forward. "Mrs. Collins, Frank was proud of what you two built. Don't let anyone take that from you." For a moment I couldn't breathe. Not because of grief, but because someone still remembered me as half of us, not the obstacle Madison painted me to be. The insurance office came next. Martha O'Neill, the agent Frank trusted, reviewed the policy and confirmed. Payout, $248,700 after adjustments. Deposited directly into the trust within 14 days. I nodded, clutching the folder tighter. 14 days. Just 2 weeks, and I would have the cushion Madison believed gone. By evening, word had already spread. Tyler's frantic texts lit up my old number, forwarded through the bank. Mom, what did you do? Our access is gone. Turn the cards back on. This is cruel. I stared at the screen before replying with one line Frank himself would have written. All inquiries go through Attorney Harry Light. Business runs as normal. Personal spending is your responsibility. I pressed send and felt the weight shift. Not relief, not yet, but power. That night in my rented walk-up above the bakery, I sat at the small wooden table with the scarf draped over my shoulders. The cinnamon smell from below seeped through the floorboards. For once, I wasn't drowning in grief. I was working. I laid out Frank's checklist, marking each completed step. Tomorrow, the county recorder. The next day, the judge. Each step a stone in the path forward. But even as I plodded, memories intruded. Madison at 16 demanding a car. Everyone else has one, Mom. Don't make me the loser. I had worked double shifts, pawned my mother's necklace, just to put her in a used sedan she promptly dented. No thank you, only complaints. Tyler later sold it behind our backs to fund his startup. And yet they dared call me toxic. I looked at Frank's handwriting one more time. Nora, follow the checklist. I trust you. I whispered aloud. I won't let you down, Frank. The night outside was quiet, but inside me something new had taken root. Resolve. Madison had shoved me onto the mud bank, certain I would drown. Instead, she had freed me from illusions. The River Trust was not revenge. It was restoration. Order where they had sown chaos. Tomorrow, I would walk into the courthouse not as a widow begging for scraps, but as trustee of Frank's legacy. And Madison, so loud, so certain, so hungry, would discover that her inheritance was nothing but smoke. The following morning I walked back into Mid-County Bank, this time alone. My scarf smelled faintly of cinnamon from the bakery below my apartment, grounding me. The folder in my bag was no longer just paper. It was a shield, Frank's voice pressed into every page. Blake Harris greeted me in the lobby with the kind of solemn respect reserved for funerals and battles. Mrs. Collins, he said quietly, let's get everything finalized. We sat in his glass office, sunlight glaring off the polished table. He explained each step with the precision of a surgeon. First, transfer the diner's operating account to the River Trust. Second, freeze all linked credit cards. Third, cancel auto drafts tied to Madison and Tyler. Finally, establish the new payroll system under your authority. The signatures came quickly, each one a guillotine blade falling. I had signed countless checks in my life, tuition payments, car repairs, credit card bills, doctor visits for Madison's children. Those signatures had been lifelines extended again and again to people who saw me not as a mother but as a wallet. Today, each stroke of my pen cut the cord. Blake's assistant slid a packet forward. Here are the transaction records. Tyler's charges over the past 6 months alone. Her voice trailed off as she pointed at the figures. Thousands on hotels, marketing dinners, designer watches, all billed under the diner's corporate card. My throat tightened. I remembered nights Frank and I scraped to pay vendors on time, counting coins in the back office while Madison stormed upstairs, furious because we couldn't upgrade her prom dress. Now her husband had drained accounts for vanity projects that never fed a single customer. Blake cleared his throat. With your approval, we'll also create a separate payroll protection account. That way staff salaries never depend on daily receipts. I nodded, relief swelling in my chest. For years I had feared not paying the cooks who kept our doors open, the barista who worked double shifts through flu season, the truck driver who hauled beans before dawn. Madison never cared about them. To her they were background noise. To me they were family. I allocated part of the trust funds immediately. Advances for the chef, barista, and driver. They shouldn't carry the weight of Madison's mistakes, I told Blake. His eyes softened. When the final documents were signed, the numbers glowed on the screen. The diner's operating account under trustee Nora Collins. Not Madison. Not Tyler. Me. For a moment I simply sat there, the hum of the printer filling the silence. 34 years of marriage, 3 decades of sweat, all distilled into one screen that finally recognized me as the rightful steward. But then the storm began. My phone vibrated with a fury that seemed almost alive. Message after message. Mom, what did you do? Our access is gone. Turn the cards back on now. You're ruining us. This is cruel. I let them stack unread. Then typed a single reply. All inquiries go through Attorney Harry Light. Business runs as normal. Personal spending is your responsibility. I hit send and shut the phone off. The silence afterward was sweeter than any hymn. Outside the bank, the air felt different, sharper, cleaner. Yet memories clawed at me. Madison at 19 calling from college. Mom, I maxed my card. Can you transfer money today? I had skipped my own doctor appointment to cover it. At 24. We want a big wedding, Mom. Dad's place will look cheap on Instagram. Frank and I emptied savings, only for them to elope in Vegas anyway. And Tyler smooth as ever. It's an investment, Nora. Image matters. He said it while ordering champagne on the diner's tab, never glancing at the busboy refilling his glass. I had built their world one sacrifice at a time. Now I dismantled it with a pin. At noon, I visited the diner unannounced. The neon sign buzzed as always, the kitchen clattered, but the staff froze when they saw me. They had read Madison's posts. Diner closed. Mom's wrecking everything. Now they watched me like a ghost returned. I walked behind the counter, pinned a new protocol sheet to the wall. Payroll on time. Tips transparent. Right OFFS only with invoices. All personal cards revoked. Some staff exchanged glances. Others nodded, relief visible in their shoulders. For months they had suspected something was wrong. Late checks, rumors of tight budgets while Tyler flaunted new suits. Now they saw order returning. I turned to them. Frank built this place on honesty. That's how it will run again. Anyone who stays will be paid. Anyone who steals will be gone. Simple as that. No one spoke, but the silence felt less like fear and more like respect. That afternoon, the bank confirmed the insurance payout had been approved. $248, $700 on its way to the trust. I instructed Blake to allocate $50,000 toward vendor balances, $28,000 toward equipment upgrades, and the rest toward reserves. Madison's fantasies of spending sprees would dissolve into payroll protections and community funds. By evening, my phone turned back on, lit up with a storm of venom. How dare you? Dad would be ashamed of you. You're destroying our legacy. But the only shame I felt was for the years I had believed those voices. I brewed tea in my small apartment, steam fogging the window. Below, the bakery's ovens glowed. I thought of Frank polishing the register drawer. His hands steady even when cancer ate at him. Follow the checklist, he had whispered. We're not victims. We're owners. Now, with the accounts flipped, I finally believed him. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. The next morning, I rose before dawn as if Frank were still beside me, nudging me awake. For 30 years, that rhythm had been our life, eggs cracked by 5 m.m., grills hot by 6 o'clock, first pot of coffee poured into chipped mugs before the sun lifted over Riverside. I thought grief would erase the habit, but it lived in my bones. By 7, I stood outside Frank's place. The neon sign hummed faintly against the pale sky. I expected hostility, doors locked, whispers from staff, maybe even Tyler waiting to shove me back out. Instead, the door opened with a familiar creak. Inside, the kitchen buzzed. Fryers hissed, bacon popped, plates clattered. For a heartbeat, everything looked the same as it always had. But then heads turned. Knives paused mid-chop. A hush spread from counter to back line. Madison's latest Facebook post had declared, "Diner closed. Mom wrecked everything." They had probably seen it, probably feared for their jobs. Now here I stood, scarf tied around my shoulders, folder under my arm. Not a ghost but a trustee. I walked straight to the corkboard by the prep station and pinned a sheet of paper with firm, deliberate pressure. My voice carried across the room, clear as a bell. New protocol. Payroll on time. Tips transparent. Write-offs only with invoices. All personal cards revoked. The words landed like stones. A few employees exchanged wary looks, testing the air. Others nodded slowly, relief dawning in their eyes. They had lived through late checks, through Tyler's phantom marketing trips, through whispers that maybe the place wouldn't last. Now they saw order returning. I turned to face them. Frank built this place on honesty. That's how it will run again. Anyone who stays will be paid. Anyone who steals will be gone. Simple as that. For a moment, silence. Then the line cook, Sam, who had worked with Frank since the early days, gave a short, sharp clap. The sound cracked the tension. One by one others followed. Not cheers, not celebration. Just steady clapping. A rhythm of acknowledgement. I swallowed hard. It was the first applause I had received in years. By mid-morning, vendors began arriving. Each carried a letter I had drafted with Harry the night before. Payment instructions updated, new account numbers, invoices cleared under trustee authority. One vendor, a gray-haired farmer with mud still on his boots, gripped my hand. Frank was good to us. Glad to see his wife keeping it steady. I nodded, throat tight. No one had called me Frank's wife with respect in a long time. But peace never lasts with vultures circling. At noon, the bell over the door jingled sharp and loud. Tyler strode in, face red, voice already raised. "You can't do this, Nora," he barked, loud enough for every customer to hear. "This is our business now." Forks froze midair. Conversations died. All eyes turned to him. I stood at the counter, hands steady on the worn formica. "It's the trust's business, Tyler. And I am trustee." He slammed his fist on the counter, rattling the napkin holder. "You're a thief. You're stealing from your own daughter." My voice was calm, almost cold. "I'm preserving what Frank and I built. What you tried to drain dry." A murmur rippled through the diner. Customers leaned closer. Staff stiffened. Tyler's face twisted, his volume climbing. "This is harassment. Madison and I will sue. We'll ruin you." I let him rant. Then the kitchen door swung open, and in walked Sheriff's Deputy Rose, uniform crisp, expression unreadable. She carried a folded paper. "Mr. Collins?" Her voice cut through his shouting. "You are hereby served notice. Access to trust assets is prohibited. Any violation carries legal penalties." The room went silent. Tyler snatched the paper, skimmed it, then crumpled it in his fist. "This isn't over," he spat. His eyes darted around, realizing every witness was watching, judging. Customers shook their heads. One older man muttered, "Shameful." For the first time, Tyler looked small. He stormed out, the bell clanging violently behind him. And then it happened. The room broke into applause. Not just the staff this time, but customers clapping, nodding, some even standing. They weren't cheering me personally. They were cheering the restoration of order, the return of dignity to a place they loved. I held my ground, spine straight, though inside I wanted to collapse from the weight of it all. That evening, I gathered the staff and posted one more memo. Employees' children eat at 50% discount. Veterans eat free on Fridays. The words were simple, but they mattered. We weren't just saving a business. We were knitting it back into the community Frank had cherished. By nightfall, word had already begun to spread. Madison's furious posts. "Mom is destroying everything," were drowned out by customers sharing photos of steaming plates, smiling waitresses, paid tickets. The truth was visible in every full table. Back in my small apartment, I sat at the kitchen table, tea steaming beside me, scarf folded neatly on my lap. I thought of the years Madison had mocked this diner, called it greasy, beneath her, embarrassing. And yet it was this very diner, this humble place of bacon and coffee, that now exposed her lies. I whispered into the empty room, "We did it, Frank. One day at a time." The neon outside buzzed steady. Inside me, for the first time since the riverbank, I felt not humiliation but strength. Turning on a dime, Frank used to say when a situation shifted suddenly. And now I understood. In a single day the diner had turned, away from chaos back toward order. But deep down I knew, this was only the opening act. Madison would not accept defeat quietly. She would come back louder, crueler, armed with more than just Facebook rants. And when she did, I would be ready. The day after Tyler's tantrum at the diner, Harry met me outside the county recorder's office. The air smelled of old stone and ink, the kind of place where lives are quietly decided with stamps and signatures. He carried the sealed envelope Frank had left labeled recorder. I carried Frank's scarf, the brooch heavy against my chest like a heartbeat. Inside, the clerk flipped through the documents with deliberate slowness. "Your daughter filed a deed transfer the same day as Mr. Collins's funeral," she said, voice flat, as if stating the weather. My breath caught. Even now, even after all the betrayals, the timing stung. Madison hadn't even let the soil settle on Frank's grave before trying to claim the house. Harry's tone was sharp. That deed is void under the terms of the land trust. Upon Mr. Collins's death, the property enters escrow until trustee rights are verified. My client is sole trustee. Here are Frank's specimen signatures, the trust agreement, and the trigger letter he signed last year. The clerk examined each page, lips pursed. Finally, she reached for a red stamp and pressed it down with a heavy thunk. Recording suspended. Deed frozen. The words leapt from the page like a verdict. Harry nodded. Next step, injunction. 2 hours later we stood before a judge in a quiet chamber that smelled of dust and leather. Harry presented the packet. The land trust, the trigger letter, Frank signed instructions. Madison was not there. She probably still believed her online declarations carried more weight than court filings. The judge, spectacles perched low, read silently for several minutes. At last he said, "Temporary injunction granted. Any actions on the property are prohibited until final hearing. Sheriff to seal premises." And just like that, the house Madison had claimed with her bold letters, property of Madison Collins, was no longer hers to touch. That evening, Deputy Rose met me at the house. Yellow tape stretched across the porch railings. A bright orange seal marked the door. She handed me a slip confirming the property was under escrow. Keys surrendered to the escrow agent. Standing there, I should have felt triumph. But instead my chest ached. This was not just a house. It was the place Frank and I had poured our lives into. I saw it all at once. The day we signed the mortgage, my belly round with Madison, Frank kissing the back of my hand. The nights I sat on those steps, rocking her feverish body while Frank heated soup inside. The hours we scraped wallpaper in the upstairs bedroom, arguing about paint colors, laughing when we realized we were too tired to care. And later, fights with Madison slamming doors, her voice shrieking, "You don't understand me." The smell of birthday cakes cooling on the counter. Frank's hands dusted with flour as he decorated. Christmas lights tangled in the oak tree out front. Frank cursing under his breath while I laughed. Now all of it was wrapped in yellow tape, as if memory itself were a crime scene. Deputy Rose touched my shoulder. "It hurts, I know. But this isn't the end. This is preservation. No one can strip it, sell it, or squat in it while we sort the legal side." I nodded, though tears blurred my vision. "It's not revenge," I whispered. "It's order." She gave me a small smile. "Exactly." That night, instead of going back to the taped house, I climbed the stairs to my rented walk-up above the bakery. It was small, 2 rooms, slanted ceilings, one window that rattled in the wind, but the smell of fresh bread from below filled every corner. Cinnamon in the mornings, yeast in the afternoons, vanilla at night. It was a strange comfort, as if the air itself wanted me to breathe again. The apartment became my refuge. No portraits of Madison glaring from the walls, no reminders of slammed doors. Just quiet. At night I brewed tea, listened to the hum of ovens downstairs, and let myself sleep without fear of intrusion. Still, the house haunted me. Every time I walked past the block, I saw neighbors staring at the seal, whispering. Some looked away quickly, ashamed. Others shook their heads, muttering about family disgrace. Betty, the same neighbor who had hissed gossip at the church lot, approached me one afternoon. "Shame what's happened, Nora," she said, eyes darting to the seal. "But maybe Madison will come to her senses." I met her gaze steadily. "This isn't about senses. It's about law." Betty flinched, then mumbled something about pie left on my doorstep. I accepted with a nod. Small apologies, late but not unwelcome. Each evening I returned to my apartment and spread Frank's folder across the table. I checked off the steps one by one. Bank done. Insurance done. Recorder done. Injunction granted. House sealed. It was like building again, brick by brick. Only this time the foundation was not hope but proof. Yet loneliness gnawed at me. I thought of Madison as a child, running barefoot through that house, curls bouncing, calling, "Mommy, look at me." I had looked at her then with pride so fierce it hurt. And now, she had turned that pride into ammunition against me. One night, unable to resist, I walked back to the house. I stood outside the yellow tape, moonlight washing the porch in pale silver. The oak tree swayed gently. I could almost see Frank on the steps, polishing his boots, nodding at me with that half-smile. I whispered to the night, "I'll bring it back, Frank. Not for her. For us." The wind rustled through the branches, almost like agreement. When I returned to the apartment, I found an envelope slipped under the door. Inside, a note in Betty's shaky handwriting. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." Pies on the counter. I sat at the table holding that note, realizing that the tide was turning. Gossip was giving way to truth. The house was sealed but not lost. The diner was open, not closed. The bank accounts were under order, not chaos. Step by step, the trust was snapping back into place. And Madison, who thought she had buried me at the riverbank, had no idea that each seal, each stamp, each quiet victory was pulling me further from the mud and closer to the life Frank and I had secured. Pastor Jim called on a Thursday afternoon. His voice was syrupy with that practiced gentleness clergy use when they know they're about to step into a minefield. "Nora, dear," he said, "I think it would help if you and Madison came together. The congregation is unsettled. A little reconciliation might heal the rift." Heal the rift. As if betrayal were a scratch, not a knife. But I agreed. Not for Madison's sake. For clarity. Sunday afternoon, the fellowship hall smelled of coffee and lemon cleaner. Folding chairs formed a circle. Pastor Jim stood in the center, glasses glinting, trying to project peace. Madison swept in 10 minutes late, dressed in a blazing red dress, hair styled to perfection, phone raised as if she were arriving at a film premiere. "Streaming live," she announced, spinning to capture every angle. Her followers would see her as the brave daughter confronting the toxic mother. I came quietly, scarf over my shoulders, folder tucked under my arm. No camera, no smile. Just documents. Pastor Jim cleared his throat. "We're here as a family to find common ground. Grief can divide, but it can also bind." Madison's laugh cut him off. "Don't make this sound noble, Pastor. Let's call it what it is. My mother can't stand to see me run things. She wants to control everything, even after Dad's gone." She turned the phone toward me. "Say hi to the people, Mom. Tell them why you froze our accounts, why you locked us out of our own house." My fingers tightened on the folder, but my voice stayed steady. "Because the house is in a land trust. Because the diner is owned by the River Trust. And because Frank put me as trustee." She rolled her eyes. "Paper tricks. Everyone knows you're jealous. You always hated me." The words might have pierced me once. But not now. I opened the folder and laid out 3 sheets. The trust filing, the insurance letter, the payroll record showing every employee paid on time. Jealousy doesn't file injunctions. It doesn't pay vendors. It doesn't keep this diner alive. The room went still. Pastor Jim reached for the papers, adjusting his glasses. Murmurs spread as others leaned in to look. Madison's face flushed. "You think people care about your paperwork? They care about truth. About loyalty. You abandoned us." I reached into my bag and lifted the flash drive. "Then let's hear the truth." Pastor Jim frowned. "What is this?" "Evidence," I said, plugging it into the fellowship laptop. The speakers crackled. Madison's voice filled the room, sharp and unmistakable. "Once Dad's gone, we'll squeeze Mom out and sign it all fast. She's soft. Easy. Just push." Gasps broke around the circle. Even Pastor Jim froze, glasses sliding down his nose. Madison lunged forward, face blazing. "That's out of context. That's not fair." But the damage was done. Her voice hung in the air like smoke after a fire. Pastor Jim removed his glasses, eyes heavy. "Madison, this is serious. This isn't grief speaking. This is intent." Madison spun to her phone, desperate. "She manipulated this. My mom is lying. She always envied me." But the comments scrolling across her live stream betrayed her. "That's your voice, girl. Disrespectful. Your mom deserves better." Her bravado cracked. The phone lowered slightly. Her eyes darted, looking for escape. I stood, not triumphant but resolute. "I don't need sympathy. I need quiet. Quiet so the business can run. Quiet so the law can work. That's all." Pastor Jim nodded slowly. Perhaps the best reconciliation is not forced togetherness, but boundaries. The meeting dissolved in whispers. Some avoided my eyes. Others gave me small nods, silent apologies for believing Madison's lies. That night the tide turned. Regulars posted photos on Yelp. Not of family drama, but of plates steaming with food. Reviews poured in about honest service, about Frank's legacy, about the diner as a cornerstone of Riverside. By morning, a note waited on my bakery apartment door. Betty's handwriting trembled across the page. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." Pies on the counter. I held the note, throat tightening. Small gestures, but they mattered. The town that had whispered my humiliation at the pharmacy, that had nodded at Madison's posts, now whispered something different. Maybe Nora wasn't the villain after all. That night I sat at my little kitchen table, scarf folded neatly beside me, pie cooling on the counter. I thought of Frank. He would have hated the spectacle, but he would have smiled at the result. The truth was out. Not all of it, not yet. But enough. Enough to begin shifting the weight of gossip into the weight of facts. And Madison, so loud, so certain, was suddenly quieter. The summons arrived folded and stiff, stamped with the county's seal. Madison and Tyler had filed a petition to restore rightful management of the diner and house, accusing me of fraud, manipulation, and elder instability. Harry smirked when he read it. They've overplayed their hand. Good. Now we take this to court, where truth doesn't rely on Facebook likes. The morning of the hearing, I dressed in my plain black suit. Not mourning black. Not pleading black. Just clean lines, steady fabric. Frank's scarf lay around my shoulders, the brooch cool against my collarbone. The courthouse smelled of old paper and floor polish. Madison swept in 10 minutes late, draped in pale pink this time, calculated innocence. Tyler wore a new suit too shiny for dignity, his tie loud as a carnival. They sat together at the petitioner's table, whispering furiously, faces tight. Judge Harmon entered, stooped, sharp-eyed, known for his impatience with theatrics. His gavel cracked once. "Let's proceed." Their lawyer rose, voice rich with false gravity. "Your Honor, our clients have been deprived of their lawful inheritance by Mrs. Nora Collins. She has manipulated documents, withheld assets, and spread slanderous recordings. We seek immediate reinstatement of their management rights." Harry stood next, calm as still water. "Your Honor, the assets in question belong not to individuals but to the River Trust, created last year by Frank Collins. My client is the sole trustee. Madison Collins has attempted unlawful seizure. Tyler Collins has drained funds through unauthorized cards, and both have slandered Mrs. Collins publicly. We request formal recognition of trustee control and appointment of a temporary auditor to confirm stability." The judge leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Let's see the books." Harry laid out spreadsheets clean as sunlight. Payroll logs showing every employee paid. Vendor receipts cleared. Insurance payout allocated to reserves. Meanwhile, he slid another packet forward. Tyler's personal marketing trips. 3 Max cards. Cash withdrawals hidden as operating expenses. The judge's eyebrows rose. "Mr. Collins, you charged $8,700 in 1 month under business expenses. Care to explain?" Tyler flushed, tugging his tie. "Networking dinner, sir. Essential for growth." Harry's tone sliced in. "Growth in Las Vegas? In Miami nightclubs? In jewelry boutiques?" The courtroom murmured. Tyler shifted, face darkening. Madison leaned forward desperately. "Dad wanted us to expand," he said. The judge cut her off with a sharp rap of the gavel. "Miss Collins, hearsay is not evidence. Sit down." Color drained from her face. Next came the recordings. The judge listened in silence to Tyler bragging about image spending, to Madison's voice after the funeral. "We'll squeeze Mom and sign it all fast." The words echoed across the chamber like poison uncorked. Madison clutched her lawyer's arm. "That was taken out of context." The judge fixed her with a cold stare. "Context does not change content. You spoke those words." Harry rose again. "Your Honor, my client requests appointment of an independent auditor to review trust finances. Transparency will prove stability. Meanwhile, petitioners should be barred from transactions to prevent further damage." The judge nodded slowly. "So ordered. Temporary auditor appointed. Petitioners are prohibited from access to trust accounts pending review." Madison gasped. Tyler muttered under his breath. But the judge wasn't finished. "As for the diner, Frank's place appears stable under current management. Payroll is timely, accounts balanced, community service intact. Petition to reinstate petitioners is denied. The words rang like a church bell. Denied. I exhaled slowly, gripping Frank's scarf. Not victory, just oxygen. Madison tried one last plea. But Your Honor, this isn't fair. It's our family business. She's twisting everything to look like. The judge's gavel cracked again. What's unfair is siphoning family assets for personal indulgence. What's unfair is attempting to strip a widow of her lawful position days after her husband's burial. This court deals in law, not theatrics. Next. Silence fell like snow. As we filed out, Tyler leaned close, his voice a hiss. You think you've won? You haven't seen what we can do. Before I could answer, Deputy Rose stepped forward, firm hand on her holster. I recommend you stop, Mr. Collins. Threats in this building carry consequences. Tyler paled and backed away. I turned to her with the first real smile that had touched my lips in weeks. Thank you. She nodded. Frank respected you. Glad to return it. Outside, the sun was blinding on the courthouse steps. Reporters weren't there. This wasn't news to the world. But to me it was everything. A judge had spoken. Not chaos but order. Harry clapped my shoulder. You held steady. That's what matters. That evening I sat again at my bakery apartment table, folder open. One more line on Frank's checklist marked complete. Court recognition. I brewed tea, steam curling upward, and thought of Frank's words. The law isn't loud. Just moves. Today it had moved. Quiet, steady, irreversible. And Madison, so loud, so certain, had finally been silenced in the only way that mattered. 2 weeks after the courthouse hearing, the insurance payout landed. I was sitting at the little table in my bakery apartment, sipping lukewarm tea when the notification came. One simple email. Deposit complete. $248,700. For a long moment I just stared at the screen. Madison thought she had gutted me. Tyler thought he had bankrupted me. Yet here it was, Frank's final shield, poured into the River Trust account. Not a fortune, but enough to turn the tide. Harry met me at Mid-County Bank that afternoon. Together with Blake Harris, we spread out the figures. First, debts, Harry said. Vendors must be cleared if you want loyalty. Second, capital improvements, you can't run a legacy on rust. Third, reserves. No staff should fear their next paycheck. I nodded, steady now where once I trembled. Frank always said you pay people first. Customers see plates but staff see envelopes. We moved piece by piece. Vendors. $50,000 to settle balances with the butcher. Produce supplier, coffee roaster. Each invoice stamped paid in full. Word spread quickly. Vendors who had begged *N to hesitate now leaned forward again, eager to work with us. Improvements. $18,400 refurbished the coffee truck. New tires, an espresso machine that didn't sputter, paint freshened to a bright cobalt. Another $9,900 bought a gleaming double-deck oven for the diner. I remembered Frank cursing at the old one, coaxing it through busy Sundays. Now the kitchen hummed like it hadn't in years. Reserves. 3 full pay cycles placed in a separate account. Staff who once feared bounce checks now had stability. When the numbers were set, about $150,000 remained. Enough to tempt, enough to squander. If I had been Madison. Instead, I opened a new account labeled Frank's Fund. Purpose. Scholarships for local high school seniors who worked weekends at the diner or coffee truck. Not charity but investment. Work and study tied together. Frank would have loved it. That night I typed the first announcement. Beginning this year, Frank's Place will award scholarships to students who balance school with weekend shifts. Applications open in June. Madison's reaction came within an hour. Her text lit my phone. You're spending our money on other people's kids? I typed slowly, each word precise. I'm investing in the town that held us. The trust serves the community, not your indulgence. Her reply came fast, venom dripping through the screen. You'll regret this, Mom. People will see you as weak. Giving away what should be ours. I set the phone face down. Weakness was bleeding out at a pharmacy counter while the cashier announced decline to a line of strangers. Weakness was begging for love by funding vacations, cars, credit cards. What I did now wasn't weakness. It was structure. The following week, the diner buzzed with renewed life. The coffee truck gleamed at the farmer's market, teenagers learning proper pour-over under Sam's watchful eye. Veterans lined up on Friday for free meals, laughing, shaking hands with staff. And on Saturday mornings, parents brought their children, who darted between booths with muffins and chocolate milk. It wasn't spectacle. It was rhythm. Work, food, laughter, the pulse of a place that had survived betrayal. But inside me, the riverbank words still burned. Get out, old witch. Madison's voice replayed at night when the apartment fell silent. Each time I pictured her shoving me into mud, believing I had no ground to stand on. Each time I reminded myself of the key in the scarf, the trust in the bank, the fund in Frank's name. One evening, I walked through the diner's kitchen after closing. The new oven glowed faintly, heat radiating. I ran my hand along its steel edge, remembering Frank. How many nights had he muttered, "One day we'll get you a proper stove, Nora?" He never lived to see it. But I had made it real. Later, upstairs in my small apartment, I sat with tea cooling beside me. I wrote thank you letters to vendors who'd stayed loyal, to staff who'd endured chaos, to community members who defended us online. Handwritten, each signed with my name. Madison wielded social media. I wielded ink. Days turned into weeks. The scholarship applications trickled in. Essays from students describing how weekend shifts taught them responsibility, teamwork, endurance. Reading their words, I felt the first true peace since Frank's death. His name wasn't being dragged across gossip anymore. It was being tied to futures. Still, Madison did not stop. Her posts grew sharper. Mom stole Dad's legacy. Mom spends our inheritance on strangers. Some followers lapped it up. But more began to question. If she's so destructive, why are paychecks on time? Why is the diner busier than ever? The truth wasn't loud, but it was steady. One Friday evening, as I locked the truck, a customer stopped me. A young veteran, uniform jacket still on, holding a coffee. "Ma'am, thank you for the free meal. Some of us don't get thanked much." His words cut through the night. I managed a smile. Thank Frank. This was his kitchen before mine. Walking home, I realized something new. I was no longer surviving Madison's betrayal. I was building past it. Each invoice, each paycheck, each scholarship was a stone laid on top of the wound. Not to hide it, but to make it part of the foundation. Back in the apartment, I stood at the window, watching teenagers laugh as they carried trays to waiting cars. For the first time, I let myself exhale without fear of collapse. Frank's plan had ripened. Not revenge. Not spite. Order. And Madison, furious, flailing blind, was powerless to stop it. It was a Tuesday evening when Madison came. No text beforehand. No grand announcement on social media. Just the quiet knock on my bakery apartment door. For a moment, I thought it might be Betty with another pie, or Pastor Jim carrying his tired hope for reconciliation. But when I opened the door, there stood my daughter, alone. No Tyler. No live stream phone raised like a wee *P***N. Just Madison in a plain gray sweater, hair pulled back, lips pale. "Can I come in?" she asked. Her voice wavered in a way I hadn't heard since she was a teenager confessing a failed exam. I stepped aside silently. She perched on the edge of the kitchen chair. Back stiff, fingers twisting in her lap. The same chair where I had balanced Frank's ledger, where I had cried into cups of tea, where I had signed documents that shifted an empire she thought belonged to her. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The bakery's ovens hummed below, the scent of cinnamon drifting upward. Finally, she broke the silence. "We thought everything would be ours automatically," she said, eyes fixed on the tabletop. "Tyler said you were weak, easy to bend. He convinced me Dad's death meant freedom. And I was angry at you. For always choosing order. For always choosing him." Her words were shards, but not unexpected ones. I folded my hands. "What do you want from me, Madison?" She looked up then, eyes rimmed red but still sharp. "Truth. And boundaries. I don't know how to live without one or the other." For a moment I almost laughed. Decades of sacrifice, betrayal, humiliation, reduced to her asking me for boundaries. Still I answered. "The trust runs the business. The house returns to me lawfully. You live on what you earn. Not on my money, not on the diner's revenue, not on insurance checks. You're an adult. Start living like one. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. And if I agree? Then we talk about the children, I said. Her eyes widened. My terms for peace, I continued, voice steady, are these: public acknowledgement of facts, apologies to the staff, and no interference in trust affairs. In return, I will create a fund for your children, my grandchildren. It will cover school, health, and activities directly. Their futures will not ride on your mistakes. Madison blinked, stunned. You do that? After everything? Yes, because they are innocent. And because I will not let my grandchildren grow up as pawns in your games. But it comes at a cost. You must sign in writing that you will not interfere further. You must admit the truth publicly. And you must stand in front of the staff you lied to and apologize. Her jaw tightened. For years, she had twisted every confrontation into a spectacle. Now she stared at the table as if it held her reflection. At last she whispered, I'll do it. I slid a blank page toward her along with a pen. My hands did not tremble. She picked it up slowly, writing each word like it was heavier than ink. I, Madison Collins, acknowledge that my mother, Nora Collins, is trustee of the River Trust. I apologize for spreading false information regarding the diner and house. I will not interfere in trust management. Her signature at the bottom looked foreign, childlike almost, as though she had forgotten how to own her own name. When she pushed the page back, I folded it neatly and placed it into Frank's folder. The sound of paper sliding across would felt final, like the last stone on a grave. For a moment, I thought she might reach for my hand. But she didn't. Instead, she whispered, I thought Dad loved you more than me. My chest ached, but my voice stayed cold. He loved us differently. He loved you enough to dream for you. He loved me enough to plan with me. That difference was never competition, until you made it one. She winced, then nodded. I stood, signaling the end. Your children will be protected. You, Madison, must protect yourself. I will not rescue you again. She rose slowly, eyes glistening, but no tears fell. At the door she hesitated. Mom! I cut her off. No. Not Mom. Not tonight. Tonight we are trustee and beneficiary. That is all. Her lips parted, then closed. She stepped into the hallway, shoulders hunched. The door clicked softly behind her. I sank into the chair, staring at the signed paper in my hands. My daughter had finally admitted the truth, but not as repentance, as transaction. It was the conversation we should have had years ago, before the debts, before the lies, before the riverbank. A conversation not drenched in love, but in boundaries. I brewed tea in silence, steam curling like ghostly fingers. Somewhere below, bakers laughed, trays clattered, cinnamon filled the air. I whispered to Frank. She came and she bent. But not for love. For survival. The scarf warmed my shoulders. I wasn't waiting for her hug. I wasn't waiting for her apology. I had already built something harder, stronger. Boundaries. And for the first time in years, those boundaries belonged to me. 6 weeks after Madison sat trembling in my kitchen, the Riverside Gazette published a letter on its front page. I, Madison Collins, acknowledge my mother, Nora Collins, as trustee of the River Trust. I admit I spread false information regarding ownership of Frank's place and the family home. I apologize to the staff and community for my actions. Her signature sprawled at the bottom like a wounded thing. That morning the diner hummed with its usual rhythm. Plates clattering, coffee brewing, when Madison walked in. No red dress. No cameras. Just jeans and a cardigan too big for her frame. The staff froze, spatula suspended, mugs mid-pour. She cleared her throat, voice brittle. I lied. I said things I shouldn't have. I hurt this place. I'm sorry. The words hung in the air like smoke. No applause followed. No gasps. Just the quiet turning of faces back to their work. Forgiveness was not owed, and none was given. Tyler never appeared again. Rumor had it he left the state. Debts snapping at his heels like dogs. For once I did not chase gossip. His absence was its own closure. The court later confirmed what had already been lived. Permanent trust control under me. The house restored through escrow. Deputy Rose herself handed me the keys, the orange seals removed. I walked through each room slowly. Dust had gathered but memory remained sharp. Frank's boots by the door, his laugh echoing in the kitchen. Madison's childhood drawings still curled at the edges on the fridge. I ran my hand over the banister he had polished with worn cloths, and for the first time in months, I let myself cry. Not for loss. For endurance. I did not move back in immediately. I kept the bakery apartment, with its cinnamon air and rattling window. It had been my shelter when humiliation threatened to drown me. Now it was mine by choice, not necessity. The diner flourished under new order. We launched a second chance program. Single parents working school-friendly shifts, veterans welcomed on Fridays, teenagers learning pour-over at the truck. Customers came not for gossip but for food and steadiness. On quiet evenings, I introduced Frank Memorial Nights. A used piano stood in the corner, its notes soft and imperfect, but full of warmth. Locals gathered not to mourn but to remember. And the grandchildren my terms kept. A fund grew silently in their names, covering tuition, healthcare activities. I refused to let them inherit the chaos their parents had brewed. When they came for muffins after school, I greeted them not as extensions of Madison, but as my own blood, deserving of stability, not manipulation. The town shifted slowly. Where once Betty whispered gossip, now she brought pies without prompting. Where once Pastor Jim urged reconciliation, now he offered silence and respect. Yelp filled not with family drama but with photos of pancakes stacked high, of coffee poured steady. Life had not become gentle, it had become orderly. And order after betrayal was its own kind of mercy. One Sunday, I walked back to the riverbank where it had all beg *n. The clay was dry now, cracked under the sun. I stood where Madison had shoved my suitcase into the mud, where she had called me old witch and declared victory. I pulled Frank's scarf tighter around my shoulders. The brooch glinted, its secret compartment empty now, the key long since used, the plan long since revealed. I whispered to the water. She thought she ended me here. She didn't know you and I had already built the way back. The river flowed on, indifferent, carrying whispers of the past downstream. I thought of Madison. Of her apology, her letter, her bowed head in the diner. I was not waiting for her to say, "Mom, forgive me." I no longer needed it. Some wounds do not close, they calcify into bone. What I chose instead was later life built on structure. Work, honesty, and traces of good left behind. Not revenge. Not reconciliation. Just permanence. As I turned to leave, I asked myself the question that had lingered since the funeral, since the mud, since the first betrayal. What is the cost of betrayal inside a family? The answer was carved into me now. The cost is everything. But survival, if you plan for it, is possible. Madison believed she had stripped me of house, diner, dignity. Tyler believed he had drained me of money. But Frank and I had prepared. We had left the key. And in the end, when they shoved me into the mud, I already carried the way back to myself.